Purdue goes to Kentucky in an exhibition game. They lose 78-65. A lot to break down, and we will break down everything you need to know from the game right here. Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. Purdue, for the third year in a row, loses their exhibition. Obviously, it is an exhibition. There are things to be taken away. It is not super indicative of how the season can go, as we all remember. 2 years ago, Purdue lost to Arkansas in an exhibition. Arkansas missed the tournament. Purdue went to the national championship and probably would have won if they didn't just run into a buzzsaw of UConn. So, there are obviously things to be taken away. We will talk about all of those, but I think at the same time, probably first thing is this doesn't mean Purdue is bad. This doesn't mean it's the end of the world. All of that, kind of probably just want to get that out there first. Kraig, you were at Rupp Arena live in person, getting into taking the game, the environment, the atmosphere. Before I guess we get into some of the player breakdowns and some of the things that stood out, how was just the atmosphere in the arena and all that?
You know, it's interesting because I've had the good fortune of traveling to multiple arenas around the country and in the Big Ten. And by and large, the hype that I hear around arenas, when I actually get in it, relative to my experience in Mackey, I'm like, like this is nice. This is okay. But it never really measures up to Mackey. This was not the case. Rupp Arena lived up to all the hype. Now, walking up to the arena, there's nothing special about the outside of it. Greg posted a picture of the outside, and I saw somebody say, "Is that an old Kroger store or what?" And like, it just kind of looks like a big rectangle. But when you get in there, the environment, the fans, it was packed for an exhibition game. It was loud early and often. Their introductions were incredible. They had fireworks going off inside the arena. It lived up to the hype. Right. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to make any comparisons one way or another next to Mackey because obviously I'm going to be biased, but Rupp Arena was pretty lit. I'm not going to lie. Now, if anybody follows me on Twitter, which I'm sure many of you do, I did ask the question, why does everybody look like they're going to a country club? And I basically got the answer that it's just an SEC thing. And I've never been to an SEC football game, like at a home game or anything, but apparently they dress up for their football games as well. But it just, I don't know. It felt like I was going to a horse race or something like that, at least in the lower seats. And I even had a few Kentucky fans chiming in saying like that they hate it, that it feels too like rigid and not like, I don't know, that it's not loose enough or something like that. But it was definitely a neat environment. Kentucky fans in person were really cool. To me as I interacted with them. I stayed in Kentucky last night. I'm with some friends staying in this town called Maysville, right on the Ohio River. All these houses down this street were built in the 1820s. It feels like you step 200 years back in time when you walk into this town. And my lighting feels like it stepped about 200 years back in time as well. So I apologize for that. But it was a cool experience all the way around for me, other than the fact that Purdue just got absolutely ran out of the gym last night.
Yeah, and obviously, if I think the players want to win, I think if you were to ask Painter, probably wasn't the worst result that happened yesterday by any means. But yeah, Rupp Arena, it's really cool that you guys got to go. Yeah, and I guess we'll just kind of transition into breaking down the game here. As I said, Purdue loses 78-65. It was a game that really Purdue you could just tell didn't have it. Simply put, like just both sides of the ball, shots weren't falling. Defense, they're still definitely working through some things. And so it just kind of results in this game where Kentucky is able to control for pretty much the entire second half. TKR ends up with 19 points and 7 of 15 shooting, Lawyer 14, Smith 11 points and 5 assists. Jacobson ends up with 9. Not a ton of production outside of the big three, and even a few of Jacobson's buckets come kind of later in the game. Keeping it high level at first, I guess, what was like the single thing or two that stood out the most?
We couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And like There's not going to be too many games that Purdue wins when Braden and Fletcher shoot 25% from the floor. And if we're looking at the shot chart, let's see. Right. So Lawyer takes 15 shots. Renn takes 15 shots. Braden takes 9 shots. So between those two, there's 39, not counting the attempts that get them to the foul line out of a total of 57 shots. So if two of those three are going to shoot 25% from the floor, this team isn't going to win many games. Do I believe that is going to happen very often? No. Also, just as a team as a whole, shoot 18% from three. I think the low on the season last year, if I remember right, was like 20%, 21%, and maybe one or two games the entire season. I don't expect to see that happening either. And to me, that bleeds into the other two issues that I think are real issues. Like, there is nothing offensively about this game that I'm looking at and getting real worried about, because they weren't just missing shots, Joe. They were missing wide open shots. There was a series in the second half at some point where Purdue had like 5 just wide open threes in a row. I think 4 different players shot those 5 threes. Every single one of them was off and wasn't particularly close to going in that particular stretch. So to me, they got plenty of good looks. Renn got a ton of wide open floaters in the first half that just didn't go down as well. And the two things that stand out that I think actually are issues was the rebounding and was the defense, especially protecting against all those like back cuts that Kentucky was running against us. And both of those issues to me are exacerbated by the fact that we miss shots, right? It's a disparity of 12 in the rebounding column, I think, on the total game. But when Purdue's missing as many shots as they're going to miss, that's just going to lend more opportunities for Kentucky to be able to rebound. And then you don't get your defense set, right? Then you're playing in transition. Then you're trying to recover. I think there were some issues trying to recover in transition, but Kentucky really wants to push the ball. They got a ton of three-point shooters standing out on the wings that they can spray it to in transition. So I think those two things are the major issues, rebounding and defense. But again, I think the fact that we just couldn't hit anything kind of really exacerbated that.
Yeah, so I'm with you on the offense. Like Painter, I think Painter said, and I don't know if it was our interview or if it was after the Purdue fan day scrimmages, but he's just like 20% of your games you're just not going to hit shots. Like it's just going to happen. Can you win those types of games? And I think right, it's an exhibition, so you don't want to put a blanket statement over it, but at the same time, it's going to be a tougher, very tough grind for them to kind of win those games. Now, I do think Braden has had a level he could probably tap into if he really wanted to. We'll talk about some of the rotation stuff. Like if it was right, if this was an Elite Eight game, I think TKR probably plays more than 27 or 28 minutes, whatever it was. So there are little things like that, but at the end of the day, they still put out this effort. They still put out this game, and right, there are things to be taken away, like you said. I'm with you with the defense, the rebounding. I think the defense, like my right, and I've said this on multiple shows, and like I don't take a ton away from exhibitions. It's just not like I take it's more things to like notes, like oh, I'm gonna kind of keep note of that to see what's going on there. Like defensively, it just felt like they were trying a bunch of stuff, and they were like it felt like how much help they wanted to send was dependent on who was in and kind of how they were wanting to defend different actions. Kentucky themselves, I think, is designed very well to like though like a Kentucky team is the team that's going to give Purdue a ton of issues defensively. Now, Purdue may just have issues defensively in general, but like Kentucky, especially where they're able to run this kind of 5-out offense, and even if they don't have 5 shooters on the floor, they run this kind of 5-out where the big man's kind of moving the ball back and forth. So now that's drawing out Clough, that's drawing out Jacobson, and now so when those back cuts happen, there's nobody at the rim. Like that, Kentucky's set up to where essentially Purdue had all the issues that they had last year because there just wasn't a rim protector because they were out towards the perimeter. Now that's something I'm going to be monitoring. I saw like where I stand with it, and my takeaway, I guess, defensively is like Clough is good in a high hedge. Like he is good getting out individually. I don't I don't think it's going to be 100% of the time. I just don't think it can be because when he's in that high hedge, it puts so much pressure on everybody else. And everybody else is kind of the point of the defense that needs to be protected outside of like CJ Jakari, Antoine West, like in Braden's hit and miss. But right, like that's the type of player. Those are the players that need to be able to be protected. Like last year when they got blown by, it was layup lines, and you kind of saw that yesterday too because the bigs had to be so far out. Now, like again, I do think that they were just trying stuff defensively. There was times where it felt like they just right with Kentucky, what they would do is they had their 5 minute at the top. They'd run pin downs on both sides, flow into potential handoffs. Purdue at times was switching those pin downs. Purdue at times was trying to stay at home, where then you're just trailing. And when the guards are trailing, it puts so much pressure then on the big to be able to hedge out, which I get that part. But then big slip, guys 45 cuts to the rim, nobody's there. Um, so it's just going to be a work in progress. I think this team can get there by February. It might be a little bit rougher than I expected early on.
Yeah. I think it's important too to keep in mind, and I know we've mentioned this a couple of times, and Painter has 1,000 times. There is no scout for Purdue going into
Yeah.
these exhibition games. And look, we know by and large, the last handful of years, like man on man, Purdue is not designed. Like Purdue rarely has super athletic guys that are just incredible singular defenders up top. Like it's probably been since No Gel, since we had like a true like elite perimeter defender from that standpoint, in my mind. But what Purdue does really well is scout that other team, figure out what they're going to take away, right? They're going to double a lot of times in the block. They're going to do certain things to force guys to their weak hand. They're going to ice a lot of times, or what they call red. They're going to do all these little different things specifically to try to maximize their team difference while kind of masking some of their individual defensive issues, right? They didn't do any of that for yesterday's game. We need to understand that. I think it's very, very fair to still openly say, hey, like, and Painter said it in the post-game press conference, like, we have to keep the ball in front of us at the point of attack. Have to. To me, I saw the same thing as you, maybe not with quite the description of the exact X's and O's, but in my head, I'm like, man, it doesn't seem like Clough's getting that many rebounds. And, you know, a few plays later, I'm like, well, he's 15 feet away from the basket because of where Kentucky's drawing him up. It's hard to get rebounds when you're there. And somebody put in the comments, which was something I saw as well, you know, in that situation, when they're doing that 5 out and your big's pulled up, your guard's got to find a body.
Yep.
Like they have to. Even if you're not close to the rebound itself, you have to find a body. And there were so many times that somebody else's guy crashed in late and either got a putback or got a rebound. Stephen Tater Swingle specifically is calling out Meyer here. There were 2 times, Joe, and like, I think it's just instinctual, I'm sure, of what he was kind of taught to do overseas compared to maybe what Purdue needs him to do. There were 2 different times the ball hit the ground within like 2 feet of him. And he was turned and headed, like running down the other end of the court as fast as he could. And I'm like, grab the ball, Meyer. Like, grab the ball. What are we doing? That Kentucky ended up getting it. So I think some of that's just maybe changing a little bit in terms of like, what's my role in those situations? But yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of it was we have one elite rebounder, and I still do think he's elite. I don't think just the fact that he only managed to get 5 in this game changes that. But so many times him or Jacobson was completely pulled away from the rim. So everybody else has to step up and rebound.
Yeah, and I'll pull up the stats here. I mean, it was a little bit, it definitely was by committee. TKR, Clough, and Jacobson all with 5 boards, Braden with 4, and then a handful of guys with adding in with 2. But yeah, when you compare it to what Kentucky was able to do, and it's skewed, right, because Purdue missed more shots, so then there's more opportunities for Kentucky to get boards. I didn't calculate the offensive rebounding percentage beforehand, And since this is an exhibition, KenPom does not do it for me. But I would assume that Kentucky won the offensive rebounding percentage battle as well. Side note, Eric Hunter, he might be the other elite perimeter defender since no gel.
True, true,
Maybe.
true. Yep. I got you. I can agree.
Yeah, and no gel probably was better defensively, but Hunter's the last one that I would say at least fell somewhat in that category. So yeah, right. I think the defense is going to be the biggest concern going forward. Was there anything offensively other than, oh wow, these guys missed shots that stood out to you? Both concerning or positive, I guess, if there was any positive you could take away.
So I saw, I think it was either Rothstein or Norlander. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Rothstein, which I love his coverage, by the way. Love his podcast as well. Put something out about Kentucky being elite defensively in this game and how good they were going to be if they could be this elite defensively. That was not my takeaway at all. I thought Purdue got plenty of the looks that they wanted to get. And Painter will talk a lot of times about, as a coach compared to as a fan, like when you're watching it, you're not upset with your offense if you're creating the looks that you want to create and the shots just aren't following, right? And that's what it felt like yesterday. By and large, they were still creating the looks that they wanted to create. There were two things to me that I would say, and maybe you can talk about this. I don't know if you got your board or not. I thought Kentucky did an incredible job of taking away that short roll pocket pass. Just the way they were bracking it defensively, it's like both guys were just trying to close that pocket to where Braden likes to drop it in there. And eventually Purdue just went away from it primarily. Like they started getting TKR the ball in other ways where he could turn face from 10, 12 feet and then was just trying to take his man off that rather than off of that short pocket pass, short roll. The other thing to me offensively, and I've brought this up a couple times last year too, is like, we know CJ and Jakari can shoot. We've seen it in exhibition games. We've seen it in scrimmages. I think they didn't take very many shots yesterday, but I think between the two of them, they only missed one yesterday, right? I know we're going to rely on the big three, and that's not going to change. Sometimes it frustrates me of all right, it's not, if it's not your day between those two guards, why aren't we getting and running a little bit more stuff for CJ and Jakari? Because we've seen that Jakari got in the paint twice yesterday, took contact, scored. CJ has just an absolutely sweet killer 15-foot pull up. Let's spread the ball around a little bit more, I guess. At times is what I'm wanting to see.
Yeah, I had that. I had that thoughts, and then once CJ hit the pull up, I was like, yeah, Craig's going to bring up how he should get more touches, which I think, to be fair, is somewhat fair, especially on a night where you don't have the efficient scoring that we expect from the big three. Right, I do think Jakari was a bright spot. CJ wasn't super involved, but I also don't think he made many mistakes. If we are going to go to some positives. But yeah, it's just going to be a balance of right. CJ and Jakari, they aren't going to take 10 shots a game. It's just not going to happen. But can you get them a couple here and there just to get things going and flowing a little bit more? Yeah, like you said, Kentucky though did a good job kind of making at times life difficult in that short roll. TKR got a few early looks in the first half, but even those, a lot of them were more closer to 15 feet. That 12, 13, 14 foot area, which he can absolutely make. But, right, he's going to make a lot more from 8 feet compared to 13 feet. So I think just with how Kentucky was able to kind of put two on Braden at times and just kind of force help in the middle, just made things difficult for TKR to fully operate. I'm not concerned about TKR. He's still, I think we would all agree that he didn't have a great game, right? Wasn't a great TKR game, and he ends up with 19 points and 5 assists on 7 of 15 shooting. That's the level that TKR is at, where it's 19 and 5, you weren't super efficient, not a great game. At least offensively and defensively, wasn't a great game either. But I don't know. I'm not concerned about the offense much. I know you aren't. Nobody really is going to be. I think Kentucky was able to do some things defensively that worked well. I also think if we were to go through and track, Purdue took 57 shots, and I felt like a lot of them were open. I do think one thing that stood out, and this is how Purdue was last year, and they were good at it, so it's not a concern, but 17 threes and 16 shots at the rim. So 33 of their 57 shots were from three or at the rim, which means 24 of their shots were from the mid range, which the mid range gets a wide margin because right, any of those TKR floaters, any of those TKR hook shots, those are all mid range shots. But that is still like a fairly high percentage of shots coming from the mid range. And I'm actually going to try to look up now what Purdue was last year. But that's the only other thing that kind of really stood out in terms of, hey, is this like, are they going to be able to get to the rim a little bit more? Are they going to take a few more threes? I think Kentucky tried to limit the threes, especially. You saw Lawyer get free off of a good chunk of just kind of handoffs and different things. And that was a main staple in Purdue's offense. But yeah, I don't know. Purdue's offense is going to be fine. They're going to have like four more games like this all year where they just cannot shoot the ball at all. And the other games they're going to shoot 60% from three, and right, it's going to be over within 10 minutes.
Were you concerned at all? Because I did see some takes about like, I just don't know if there's enough spacing with Clough and TKR out there. Didn't jump out to me as anything being dramatically different from last year playing next to first in terms of spacing, but were you concerned about that at all?
No.
Me either.
Like, I think it was more just a little clunky at times because of the flow. I think there was just there's a little bit to improve in terms of how they flow from action to action. And that's just going to happen as, essentially Clough and Jacobson are like Jacobson obviously has a year in the program of understanding what to do. You still got to physically go and do it. And it just
Right.
takes some time to be able to flow through some things, right? Like a guy like First last year, even if he wasn't the biggest threat scoring, he moved very well and he had been in the system for 4 years. Like he knew, okay, if I'm catching here, I am immediately turning and flipping to go to the next guy, right? So I think there's some of the little nuances like that as those improve, it's going to look less clunky. Like I would bet if somebody asked Painter, and maybe somebody did in post game, I don't know. Like, but if somebody asked Painter, like, hey, would you take basically all of that shot selection again? Like, if you guys played again, I'm sure Painter would, for the most part, be like, yeah, absolutely. Like, they only had 7 turnovers. They got to the free throw line 22 times, which is really, really good. Go 18 of 22, which is 81%, which is also very good, obviously. Like, I think there's a lot of positive offensively. Just right, the comfortability specifically between Clough and Jacobson just isn't fully there yet. And it's
Mm-hmm.
what, October 25th. So like they got a little bit of time. They'll get 2 games against more mid-major type teams early on. Now they will have the test against Alabama pretty in their third game. But there's going to be time to improve. There's going to be time to develop with how, because TKR operates so much in just the short mid range and mid range area. Like I just don't think it's a concern because now you can get Clough just in the dunker spot. Um, yeah, I'm not concerned about the spacing.
Yeah. Were you shocked by the fact that at the end of the night there's only one shot attempt in the box score for Clough?
Yeah, that one I was even more so than CJ and Jakari because I figure Clough is like the fourth option, and like maybe that is just a byproduct of right Purdue getting a lot of mid-range shots, and Clough's not really that type of guy. But I only think they threw the ball in the post to him once,
One
if I
time.
remember. Yeah, if I
I
and was
think
that
I think
his
there was a
that was his
pass
shot?
from there was one true like, all right, we're gonna post you up and give it to you. The other time I think was like off of a drive and it gets dished to him, he gets fouled, goes to the line and goes 1 for 2. But yeah, I mean, I expected a decent amount of Clough shots to come from offensive rebounds and putbacks. But I just still expected to see some stuff where, and maybe part of it too was that they just shut that short roll off so much, because in my head, there was going to be a lot of, TK gets that ball in the middle in that short roll. Somebody's going to jump up and he's going to be able to kind of just drop it off to Jacobson or Clough. And like I said, I thought they did a really, really nice. That was the one thing I did think they did well defensively, was just kind of limiting that altogether.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, maybe it becomes more of a point of emphasis. Hey, we're gonna get Clough some looks, like, or even like, because if you remember 2 years ago when it was TKR ED, TKR coming out of half, it was almost every time it felt like it was a TKR post
Yep.
touch, like every time almost. And so maybe there are some situational things like that where it's like, all right, coming out of the half, right, we've just been feeding Braden and TKR. Let's get Clough a touch just to kind of keep the defense a little bit honest. We're coming out of, well, I don't know if they want to do it out of timeouts, but just different things like that to be able to, get looks for their guys. Trying to think any
Yeah.
like high level type things. Like transition defense was terrible. Purdue has to be,
Terrible.
like, if they're not going to rebound the ball well, then you just please get back. Um, it just seemed like it. It felt like another thing where it was just kind of like they had to spend time processing what they needed to do, and it wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
instinctual of like, oh, I need to either crash or get back. Which from guys like Braden Fletch, you kind of is a little bit surprising. Some of the other guys, it makes some more sense at least. I know Meyer's been brought up. I think even like West went in his few minutes. Jacobs, or not Jacobs, and Benner, like those make a little bit more sense, right? It's their first real action. It's going to improve, but yeah, you gotta if the transition defense is going to be that bad, where Purdue is a slow team, they are going to be arguably the least athletic team in the Big Ten, or one of the least athletic teams in the Big Ten. You got to have one of those two categories be good. You either got to be so good on the glass that, you know what, it's fine that we're going to give up some transition points because we're going to make it back up, or you gotta be much better defensively on transition.
No, I would agree 100%. It's like I said, we're 20. Oh well, we've only got like 15 minutes left in the show, Joe, and we've not even talked really specifically about defensive issues. And want to do some player highlights. Both of us have to hop off here at about 9:45, so we are going to try to move through this. But I'm just going to let you talk because you're better at breaking down defensive stuff here. What specifically do you jumped out in terms of what Purdue needs to improve on from a defensive standpoint?
Yeah, I'm gonna draw up the board here. Um, and one is maybe just be more athletic, but um, in all seriousness, kind of getting into some of the things that stood out defensively. So, right, Kentucky. So this is where Purdue is on defense. Kentucky started out in a lot of this kind of five out look, and as you can see already, this is Clough, this is Jacobson. They're a long ways away from the rim, and right, if I want my 7-footers closer to this area right down here. So obviously, even just from the start, they're not. And that's part of what Purdue's going to do. I like having the optionality to be able to pressure bigs. And you saw what Clough forced a turnover where he just got into the big and made life uncomfortable. So there is positives there. But what Kentucky was doing was just setting two pin downs. And Purdue kind of went through a few different looks where at one point they kind of, as the guys came off, they would just switch these. Okay, so we're right now. This guy would take here. This guy would take here. Same thing here, and just kind of stay in front. What that opened up though is this guy would, instead of screening, is if he just slips. Now this guy's not going to be able to get, kind of cut over in time. So now that opens up that back door. Or so that was kind of what from my eyes, what they started in was trying to kind of switch, basically 1 through 4. They're going to be able to do it at times for sure, but at times it's going to put a lot of pressure on TKR. Purdue is not a great screen navigation team to begin with. Smith, Lawyer, even off ball, I think CJ and Jakari aren't as good as they are on ball screen navigation. Where, right, when they're just coming off these screens, I'm going to set this back up again. Like as they're coming off of trying to navigate these screens, they're just behind. It's just what happens. And it's not what Painter wants. It's not what Purdue wants, but it is what happened. And so now here, right, we talked about, okay, they switched first. Now later in the game, basically what has happened is this guy tried to like jam this guy a little bit and really get up into him as this screen was happening. So I guess really he'd be more like here, try to jam. And now you have curl and this guy's chasing. And so what this looks like, so after the screen's already set, is here, here, and then something like this. This guy, this is where like some of these curls could happen, these 45 cuts could happen, and you have a right again, the big is up here. So there's nobody here to protect the rim. If it's one of these guys, this is Braden, this is Fletch, this is sometimes TKR. And we saw the one foul on TKR that looked very much like a block, at least from my vantage point, which is not in Rupp Arena. So maybe I was wrong. But it's just a lot of issue kind of navigating screens like this. And then this paint was so wide open because they were able to draw up bigs. Now, not every team's going to be able to do this, but it is going to be a concern. And then let's say, okay, Purdue gets through, right? They do a good job. They navigate the screen well. Now they're just going to kind of flow into this handoff, right? Where he's going to dribble over, handoff, and then come around. And this is where you saw Clough does a good job in hedge, right? Kind of as this ball handler is coming out, pushing back this way. The issue then becomes if this slip happens, right? Who exactly is helping? And my point from the earlier part in the show is like, if Clough is out here and he isn't forcing a turnover or he isn't like making the guard have to reset, Purdue is in essentially the same exact problem as they had last year of, all right, who's going to like be a body that can protect the rim? So right, that's where you can see this handoff happening, this slip happening, and somebody has to tag. Like in this case, it'd probably be the low man here. But if that's CJ, Braden, Lawyer, like there's only so much they can do from a size perspective. I do think one other thing worth noting to me is I haven't gone back and watched the game, so I could be wrong. Take it with maybe a slight grain of salt. And I also think it's probably an exhibition, so they're just trying things. But against handoffs like this, Jacobson was high hedging. And that really stood out to me of like, huh, they're even against that, like they're even having Jacobson out there. Now, if it was just a normal pick and roll, right, just your traditional kind of, right, where it's like this, and then you have your big coming up to set the screen. Now Jacobson was in a drop here, whereas the screen's coming off. But if it was that handoff look, Jacobson was in more of a hedge. And my thinking for the reasoning is that because the guards just get so far behind, they want to just jut out and just force the guard back to give the time for the trailer to get back in front, and then they can hopefully set up. So that was among some of the things that really stood out to me defensively. I think there's a lot more probably. And obviously, like Kentucky didn't run that exact play 100% of the time. There was other things they wrinkled in, but that felt like if I was to say what their base offense was, it was probably fairly close to that. And Purdue just had if they're going to put their big out top and try to force pressure and utilize their bigs that way, the screen navigation just has to be better. Simply put, it just has to be better.
Yeah, and I for me, we kind of heard Painter say last week that they can't. He felt like they couldn't just constantly play and drop, and when you're in drop, you're basically forcing them to take mid-range shots, and by the numbers, those are the most inefficient shots. But as Painter was saying, but also you're basically allowing them into the paint. And the numbers say that when they allow them into the paint, generally bad things happen for Purdue from a defensive standpoint. So he talked about the fact that we want to put more pressure up top. We can't just constantly be playing and drop. We got to hedge a little bit, all that sort of thing. But I'm kind of like with you. It's like, all right, once that big man's out there, who the heck else on this team is with bringing any type of rim protection at all? Because when we play a Kentucky or somebody like that who has length at the 3, at the 4, it seemed like they kept getting like a 3 onto, well, even Fletcher at the 3 or on a 2. I think Braden was trying to defend a 3 or a 4 underneath the rim on one of those where he gets switched onto him, where they just had a size advantage over whatever guard or wing got switched onto that 3 or 4, and it just felt like they ran it over and over and over again. Now,
Yep.
I do also have to say, Braggs told us he couldn't join us, and he's in here chiming in. And, like, guys, SEC fans are elite level trolls. Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky now. Anytime we play one of these SEC teams, like, their fan base in the comments on Twitter or anywhere else are just at another level besides any fan base in this world not named UConn. And Greg's posting stuff before the game like we're the friggin' dream team, talking about us throwing stuff off the backboard and whatnot. And all it's been, my phone's just been blowing up with Boilers in the Stands notifications about people coming back at Greg. And Greg just runs away, just doesn't. He's not on Twitter at all last night or this morning. I'm having to view it all. I don't know. I don't know, Greg. You're killing me. But I back to the defensive thing. Okay. I'm with you there. I thought Kentucky really did a good job of kind of seeing what their advantage was and taking advantage of that. Some of that is the fact that Purdue doesn't have the longest. Well, we really don't have a wing, right? Besides Benter. Benter's really the only one. But I thought he struggled a little bit against some bigger guys at different times yesterday. He tried to fight. He got in the scrum like he always does. Also, guys, there's going to be a quiz next week over everything Joe just went over. Jace Rillen at 80 at some point during your board was just like, what? So yes, there will be a quiz next week. I will post it before the game. We'll see who does the best.
There we go. I will try and improve in terms of explaining. I know I can ramble and just kind of keep talking, especially when I get the board going like that, but
it was good. It was good.
Thanks. So we got, well, I'm going to answer this question really quick from Tater Swingle. Would it make more sense to have TKR high hedge and keep DJ and Clough back for rim protection? TKR is just as bad as a backside helper defender because he has 0 shot blocking ability. I do think that one was a block. I'm still going to stand on that. His one foul I thought was a block, but you saw later in the game TKR was in a high hedge, and at times you are going to get Clough and DJ in that drop coverage. I think it's just an exhibition. They wanted to try things. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Braggs joins the show. Braggs, we have 8 minutes. I do have to actually leave in 8 minutes.
Yes, I heard that. And if my internet's too bad, just kick me out of here. No hard feelings. I understand. But how is my internet right now? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you driving?
Let's just stick to the game script right now. Okay, just relax for a second. Yes, I was joking about the off the backboard stuff, but Kentucky fans on Twitter, maybe aren't the smartest. But I will say this: shout out to the Kentucky fans at Rupp Arena. I was thoroughly impressed with the atmosphere there. I thought their fans were fantastic. Everywhere I went, walking around Rupp Arena, you had multiple times saying, welcome to Kentucky, welcome to Rupp Arena. Like, just very welcoming. They're very passionate about their basketball team. And obviously interactions on Twitter aren't great representation of what a fan base or, people from that part of the country are. They were great, honestly. And they were dialed in for this game like it was March Madness. I mean, it was an intense atmosphere for an exhibition game. And so ultimately, and I'm sure you guys talked about this earlier, I think that's exactly what Painter wants out of these. And, sure, would it have been nice for them to fight back a little better in the second half? I'm not saying Painter wants them to lose by 16 points, whatever it ended up being. But that being said, I do think, being able to expose what their weaknesses are, being able to have on film, all right, these are the things we want to work on if we want to have a chance of winning a national championship. That got accomplished last night. So, it's a great litmus test, and I just think overall my biggest takeaways as I wrap this whole thought and tangent up is I want to see more Jakari Harris for sure. I think, a guy like that can knock down threes, make shots, get to the rim, length and athleticism. I think that was my biggest takeaway from this game is that Jakari Harris is going to demand more minutes as this season goes on. And clearly, Oscar Clough and TK are going to have to learn to play with each other. That's going to take time. And Omer Meyer, I think fans are just going to have to be patient with him. As talented as he is and as excited as we were for him coming into the program, coming from Tel Aviv, playing professional basketball there's an adjustment, for him to, play back over here. I think it's just a different type of basketball. There was a couple times last night where the coaching staff's trying to get his attention, and he's kind of lost out there. So those are my biggest takeaways. Joe, you were talking about being surprised that Oscar Clough only had one touch. I think the other thing that I think about watching when they're going through their offensive sets is if they need to go into the post, it takes too long to get there because they're screwing around with the high pick and roll because that's their bread and butter. But when it's not working, I feel like at times they should be switching it up and go back to the old way of with Edey, get him in the post, whether it's Clough or TKR, and throw it down into him just to give the defense a different look. But overall, those are my tangent thoughts. I'm sorry for my tweet yesterday. Just let the Kentucky fans have their fun. If you told me that Purdue's playing Kentucky on April 10th for the national championship, I'll take that matchup all day, every day. This team will be much more prepared. We've been down this road a million times. When we get to the end of the season, this team will be ready to play basketball. They'll know what their rotations are. They'll be ready for game plans. I take you back to the Marquette game last year. Did it look like Purdue would be ready for a game against Houston in the March Madness tournament when they lost to Marquette earlier last year? No. But as the season goes on, they will come together. They'll find their roles. They'll find their rhythm. And ultimately, they got to find themselves on the defensive end. And that is my rant, as my friend Phil would say.
All right, we're losing you, Greg. You're breaking up.
All right, goodbye.
All right, Joe. We
3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes to fire through the players. Just go as fast as you can, Joe.
I'm just going to keep it high level. Right. We talked about so also I have the minute rotation up. Colored box means that player played that minute. Positions are a little bit more fluid than what this shows, right? If you want to argue somebody's a shooting guard, small forward, whatever. Braden plays 33 minutes. I think he had another level. I think he was keeping some in the tank, truthfully. Good passing, like whatever. CJ, I thought solid defensively, probably one of the brighter spots, didn't get featured a lot offensively. Lawyer just couldn't get it going offensively. Same with TKR. We'd already talked about Clough. I would say Jakari was probably the brightest spot to me as well. And CJ might have been second in that, just with his ability to get a transition look. I thought the defense was pretty good. Wouldn't be shocked if he starts getting more minutes too, and it's closer to like a 20-20 split between him and CJ. Jacobson, maybe the second brightest spot to me, especially kind of his second half started to get things going, legitimate lob threats. Meyer's going to take some time, but he's going to get there eventually. Do not abandon any, your hopes on Omer Meyer after one exhibition game. He's going to get there. Benner is the backup 4. I think that's very obvious now, and we'll kind of see what happens with West. Do you have anything?
Yeah. and like West, obviously, that redshirt decision is going to have to be made at some point in time. I've openly been really high on West throughout the summer, watching him in practice and scrimmage. I don't know that it's there yet. I think he's going to be really, really good at some point. Even defensively yesterday, there were some times where he's chasing out a closeout and then just gets blown by because he was going too hard and not worrying about that guy coming at him. And there was nobody behind him to protect him. He got wide open to the rim. Completely with you. Already kind of talked about it with Meyer. I think Meyer is going to be really, really good. You could tell they're just still not sure where I'm supposed to be, not sure what my role is in this position. And he was aggressive when he had the ball in his hands. That's what he's used to. He hit some shots when he had the ball in his hands. That's what he's used to. It looked a little just not quite there yet from a continuity and a fluidity standpoint when he was playing off ball. and trying to figure out again, like, what's my role? What am I doing? How am I getting worked in the offense right here, right now? But I'm
There
with
it
you.
is.
Like, it's one game. He's going to be good. Give it some time.
3-minute summary for the show right there. Boilers in the stands. Obviously, Purdue loses by 13. It's an exhibition, so there's like, it doesn't matter, but also there are things to take away. I think we did a good job hitting on all of that. Purdue does have another exhibition in like 5 days. They play Wednesday against UND, 7 o'clock. That is on Big Ten Plus. We will, I believe, be at Mackey Arena, and we'll be doing, I assume, a post-game show shortly after probably press conferences end. So if you want to tune into that, make sure to subscribe. If you turn on bell notifications, you will be notified as soon as we go live. And make sure to hit the like button on the way out, as this is the first post-game show of hopefully 40 more. I think, right? That would be, I think 40 more is the goal. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Boilers and Stands so you can see all of Bragg's tweets that just go viral surrounding Purdue basketball. Do appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you Wednesday after the UND exhibition.